Alrighty guys, welcome to this week. Let's take a look at what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be talking a little bit about Ajax and what that is and how to load JSON data with it. And we're also going to talk about how to load cross-site. In other words, load JSON data from one website and load it on another. Alright, there's a lot to go, a lot to cover. Let's take a look here at what we're going to be doing. So we're going to be taking the JSON data that you've already loaded or already created, and we're going to apply Ajax to it. Ajax just basically, in a nutshell, allows you to load content without refreshing the browser. It lets the browser communicate with the server and just pull data from the server without having to refresh the page, which is really nice. So you're going to take two of the JSON objects you've created and create a page for each of them. So you'll have two HTML pages in total. The two pages need to display part of the object when they first load. So we'll look at that. Okay, and then you need to have two other parts of the object be loaded when the button is clicked. So you'll have two buttons. So you'll have a part of the object load when the page loads, and then you'll have two buttons. When you click on one button, another part will load. When you click on another button, that part will load as well. So you'll have two pages that load three parts, basically. So one page loads three parts of the object, another page loads the other three parts of another object. And then you'll create one more HTML file that will load this external JSON file that I'm hosting on my host. It looks like that. It's a really simple JSON object, and you're going to load that information, and I will show you how. Okay, now a big thing to remember here is Ajax has to communicate with the server. So in other words, Ajax will not work unless you upload it to your server. Okay? So what we're going to do here, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call it JSON Ajax, I guess, because that's what we're going to be doing here. This is week 2 stuff. This is all that we've been doing. So what I want to do is I want to kind of start to separate some of these things. So I'm going to go File, New, and I'm going to create a JSON file. So I'm just going to take my whole JSON object. When you do this, you want to grab everything that is in between the two curly brackets. So I'm going to copy that and bring it over here. Now we can tell if we did it right, because remember, you can copy this, and if we come over to JSON lint, remember that validator, we can throw it in there, hit validate. Okay, and this is having some issues, and I actually messed with this a little bit. You can't have comments in JSON, so I need to get rid of those. They're just comments that I had from me. So I will call this turtles.json. I'm going to save that in my folder here that I created. Okay, now that I got rid of those quotes, or not those quotes, but the comments, I'm going to throw it back in there, validate it. Okay, then it's valid. So that's good. So you want to make sure you did it correctly, and I did. And we're going to refer back and forth to this week 2, because I don't want this video to be too long. It's probably going to be long, but I don't want it to be too long, and I'm just going to grab some things from week 2 so I don't have to recover information that we've done. All right, so I've created that. Create another file, and this is going to be my HTML file. So I will call it, I'll just call it ajax.html. Where did it go? There it is. Okay. Alrighty. Now I'm just going to have a typical page here. So we'll throw that in there. Close out the body. Close out the HTML page. I'm going to say load JSON using Ajax. And the HTML page is going to be pretty dang small. There's not going to be a whole lot in there. So I'm going to load the allies using Ajax. Okay. And I'm going to do that with the UL tag. This is just what we did basically last week. I'm just setting up placeholders that are going to hold that information. So this is where the enemies is going to load. Do that. So I'm not really changing a whole lot from last week. Okay, then we're going to load the moves. And if you hear my kids beating the junk out of each other, welcome to my home. This happens all the time. So ID equals moves. Actually, we'll just call it move. Okay, and then I'm going to create another folder or another file, and I'm going to just call this script.js. This is going to be where I'll write my JavaScript here. So we're going to do most of the work in here. Okay, so get rid of that. Let's open up that folder now. So basically I have the HTML file that you're going to need, the JavaScript file that you're going to need, and then the JSON file that I'm going to be pulling from. So remember, the assignment here is you need two. You're going to make two, so you'll be making two of these. Okay, and they're probably going to have different JavaScripts, but they're going to be pulling from the same JSON file. Well, no, well, I don't know. It all just depends on how you set it up. I set up my whole object on one. If you had multiple objects in one JSON file, then okay. It all just depends on how you set it up here. I set up my one object here with all the different key value pairs. You'll probably have separate JSON files, to be honest. So anyways, you'll have basically two sets of these. Two HTML files, two JavaScript files that you're going to play with, and then two JSON files with the different objects. All right, so what we need to do is have two objects, a page for each. So I created one page for one of the objects. They have to display part of the object when they first load. This we've kind of already done. So if we go back to week 2, remember we have these loops that go through. So I'm okay. I don't like it when you copy and paste, but I'm going to. It'll be kind of up to you whether you're going to. But I basically want to grab all the allies. So I'm going to have them load, but I'm going to have them load using Ajax. Okay, and then I'm going to have them load inside of ally here, this on our list of ally. Okay, so the last thing, well, one of the last things here that I want to do is I'm going to load this script. So script source equals So I'm going to load everything that I write in here inside of this HTML file. So I'm going to work on loading inside of allies first, and then I'm going to have buttons that load inside of enemies and moves. Okay. So first thing I want to do here is I'm going to start writing the script. So the way you write Ajax is you have to set up a variable that basically contains the request. So I'm going to call mine Ajax request. You can call this whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I'm going to set that up. And now what you do is you set up an if statement. Let me make this a little bigger. I'm going to set an if statement. So if window.xml HTTP request, if the browser contains or if it is supporting or uses this XML HTTP request, then great. That means you're probably using a more up-to-date browser. So inside of Ajax request, I'm going to store a new XML HTTP request. Okay, now if not, if you're using some old school browser, which hopefully you're not, it's going to be some old school Microsoft browser. Yay, we always have to set up things for IE. To be honest though, this is probably going the way of the dinosaur. But all this saying is if your browser supports the XML HTTP request, that means you're using an up-to-date browser, even Edge, Chrome, like Firefox, all of them support this. So if it can support XML HTTP requests, that means you're using an up-to-date browser. So inside of Ajax requirement or rec, I'm going to be storing a new XML HTTP request. If your window doesn't have an XML HTTP request, that means you're using an old school browser. So that means I'm inside of Ajax request. I'm going to be storing a new ActiveX object. And that's basically only supported by like really old school Microsoft Internet Explorer. So to be honest, fast forward a few years, this is probably going to completely go away. But because I'm using a new browser, an up-to-date modern browser, I'm going to be storing inside of Ajax REQ this new XML request. Okay. All right. So the Ajax requirement, we're going to open up the JSON file that we need to use. So we're going to use the get method, and I'm going to be opening turtles.json. Wow, what did I call it? Yeah, turtles.json. Okay. So with that Ajax request, I'm going to be opening that JSON file. Okay. Now when the browser talks to the server, there's certain states that it returns. It returns a status and it returns a ready state. Okay, so I'm going to say Ajax on ready state change. In other words, when the server comes back and tells me the state and the status, it's going to reply to me here some information. Okay, so when the ready state changes, I'm going to run a function. Okay, and that function is going to check the status. So if the status is 200, and put this in parentheses, the Ajax request ready state is equal to 4. Now you don't need to know much about what 4 and 200 means. All that's saying is just that everything's good to go. The server responds and it's ready to give information to the browser, the client, right? That's really all that's saying. So if the status is 200 and the ready state is 4, that means now we can start running the code that we want to run. Okay, and this we can pull from your previous assignments because we don't really need to talk about this because we talked about it last week. So I am trying to pull, go back here, I'm trying to pull the allies, right? So I'm going to go back here to my work here where I already wrote the code that pulls all the ally stuff from the JSON file, which is right here. So I'm just going to copy that. You can type it out again. If you type it out again, it'll help you remind what's going on, but you can copy and paste this over. I'd be okay with that. Okay, now this is when you start getting all kinds of things being nested in all kinds of things. So you got to be really careful with your brackets. Okay, so the cool thing about brackets is it tells what curly bracket matches up with what curly bracket. So these two match up, so I'm going to kind of tab that over. Okay, this is inside of an if statement, so I'm going to tab that over. So the curly bracket for the if statement starts there and it ends there, so I want it to be right underneath the thing that it ends. Okay, this for loop has a curly bracket. It recognizes that adds, that's the kind of pair to it. So I want it to, it starts there and I'm going to have it end right underneath it. So I'm going to tab that over. Okay, and then we have this if statement, right? This has the curly bracket. Well, it's right underneath there, so that's good. I'm just going to get rid of some of the spaces. Okay, and then we have this function that has the opening curly bracket. Well, that starts up there. Okay, so I want it to be right underneath it, and that's good. You just got to make sure that this document.getElementById really, this is going inside of this if statement. So if the status is fine and the ready state is fine, then it's going to do all this it's going to do all this code. So that's really inside of the if statement, so I tabbed it over. Okay. So it's just good to keep all your tabs and everything lined up because it'll help you make sure that everything is lined up the way it should be. Okay. All right. So we've set up the new Ajax request. Basically, we've stored it inside of Ajax rec. Okay. We used the Ajax recs to open the JSON file. Okay. When the state changes, in other words, when we communicate with the server and it comes back and that state changes, we run this function. And if the status is 200 and if the ready state is 4, we run the code that pulls from the JSON file. Okay, and then it throws it inside of ally. Okay, and if we come back here, we have it, ID equals ally. So it will show, it'll throw whatever output is inside of ally. Okay, now we're missing a few things here, is we need to say Ajax requirement dot send. So really what happens is it sets up this Ajax requirement, that it sets up the request, the XML HTTP request. Okay, it opens it up, it grabs it. Okay, and then the state hasn't changed yet. So it kind of skips all this code and then it sends the request to the server. So when it sends that request to the server, then the state changes. So the ready state changes and then it runs the function. So really it sets all this up first. It opens up and kind of, embeds the JSON file, gets it ready to be read, skips all this, sends the request, then the request gets sent. Once it's sent, then this ready state changes and then it runs all this. So that's kind of the order that the code gets ran in. Okay, so now we can see if this works. So you got to open up FileZilla. Okay, I am going to run this here so I get connected. I'm going to go to my public HTML folder. This is in a folder called JSON Ajax. I'm going to do this inside my DaveKid domain. So I'm going inside of DaveKid. You won't have to do that. You just have to go into public HTML. So I'm going to upload this whole folder JSON Ajax inside of my davekid.tk domain. All right, there it is. So I'm just going to click and drag. It's kind of uploading everything, says it's done. So now I should be able to go to davekid.tk / well, I'll just go there. But it should be /JSON Ajax. Or is it Ajax JSON? Nope, JSON Ajax. There it is. So I could say /JSON Ajax because that's the name of the folder. Okay, and I'm going to run ajax.html. Okay, so nothing's showing up. Okay, and we have to take a look at it. So I hit F12, or you can right click and go to inspect. and we can kind of troubleshoot through this. So it's not liking something on line 12 of script.js. It's saying turtles is not defined. Okay, so we can head over here. 12, it says turtles is not defined. Okay, and that's because we haven't passed turtles into this code here. All right, so yeah, we haven't told it what turtles is. So what we need to do is when it goes out there and gets this JSON file, it returns, we have to basically return a string. We have to receive that string of all the JSON data, and then we have to parse it. In other words, we have to make it, trying to turn it into JSON information so we can use it. Okay, so what we need to do here is right above the variable output, I'm going to create a variable called turtles, and I'm going to set it equal to JSON parse, and it's going to parse the Ajax request and what was returned, so the response text. Now the reason why I'm using the variable turtles here is because that's what I have down in here in all my JSON code, right? So I'm basically saving inside of turtles all the JSON data. Okay, so the Ajax request opens the JSON file, okay, and then once it goes and does that, it's going to return response text. So I set up a new variable called turtles. I'm using turtles because that's the variable I used in all of the code here. And inside of turtles, I'm saving the JSON, which is being returned from that open, and it returns as basically a long string. So I'm going to parse that into JSON data. So what I'm going to parse into JSON data is the response text from the Ajax. So when I do Ajax open, what gets returned from this get method, from this get, is stored inside of response text. So it goes out to turtles.json, it responds and with the response text, and so I receive that response text and I parse it, and then I save that JSON data inside of turtles. All right, so that's what we're doing there. So I'll open that. So now I'm going to go inside of that JSON Ajax. So now I can just kind of start uploading things as I change them. So I updated script, so I'm going to pull that over and I'm just going to override it, hit OK. All right, now we'll come back here and refresh, and booyah, it works. Okay, good. Now I loaded that when just the page loads. Now we want to load this by buttons too, so we can see that actually the page does not reload when it loads this data with an Ajax request. So this is where things are going to get a little copy and pasty-y. Again, I would recommend, if you're not really sure exactly what's going on, I would type this out again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste just mainly so I don't know, just so this video isn't 50,000 years long. It's going to be long enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back to my HTML file and I'm going to create a couple of buttons. I'm just going to use the button tag. Okay, and when I click this button, I'm going to run a function called load enemies. Well, I'll just call it load enemy. Okay, and then the button will say load enemies. Let's say load enemies. That makes sense. Keep it kind of all the same. Okay, and I'm going to create it. Well, I won't do that yet. I'll just create that button. That's it. So when I click on this button, it's going to try to run a function called load enemies. So I have to go back to my script and I got to create that. So function load enemies. Okay, and then I put that function inside of curly brackets. So really inside this function, all we're going to be doing is doing this again. All of this basically. We're going to create a new Ajax request. We're going to go out and get turtles again. If the status and state is all good, then we're going to load all the JSON data, put it inside of the HTML file, and we'll be on our way. All right, so this is where I'm just going to kind of copy this. And again, I would really highly recommend you're not copying unless you totally know what this code is doing. Okay, so now I need to kind of tab over a little bit, just because brackets didn't do a very good job when it copied it in there. Actually, all that looks pretty good. And just move these over. The main thing is we just want to make sure that these brackets are right underneath where they start. These closing brackets are right underneath the thing that they're closing. And that's okay there. That closes the for, so we're good there. Closes the if, get that underneath. That's part of that. Yeah, this really should be over. It's kind of annoying. We're going to have to tab everything over, but it'll make everything a little bit easier to read. Okay, it's tab, tab. Get that over. There we go. Ajax send is part of that, and that's the function. Okay, perfect. So that closing is part of the function, so it's right underneath function. That closes out the function here on the state change, so it's right underneath. That closes the if statement right underneath. That closes the for right underneath. That closes the if right underneath. Okay. Now this one is going to be, this is for the enemies, right? Load enemies. So I'm going to come back here to my code for the enemies, and I'm going to grab it. I have some commented stuff here that I really am not going to want. So I'll get rid of that later. So I'll come back here, and I'm going to be pasting it over all of this. Okay, so from where the variable starts to where I have my document.getElementById. Now again, if you're copying and pasting, you just need to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing, because you may copy and paste and screw things up. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my commented thing there. You probably won't have that, so no worries there. That if statement needs to be over. Okay, there's my document.getElementById. Okay, cool. So the main thing, so now what I did here is I have a new request. You know, this might work, and I wonder, I'm not 100% sure if this is going to work. I'm not sure if it's going to yell at me because I have multiple Ajax requirement variables. So actually, we're going to just upload it and see if it freaks out. Okay, so we have that. We'll take a look. We'll see if it works. I'm going to upload script. So again, I have this button, load enemies. So when we click it, it's going to run the function called load enemies. Comes over here, finds it, sets up the Ajax request, sets it up in that variable Ajax REQ. Okay, opens up turtles JSON again, does all the stuff, runs the code, and then puts it whatever output 2 is equal to inside of enemy. So Like I said, I'm not really sure if this is going to work. We will see. Oh, and I need to upload my HTML file too because I added the button to it. There's the button. Click it. Oh, we got to do the same thing. We did the exact same issue. That's awesome. So I need to grab that line. Oh, wait, I think it goes above it. I don't think it really matters. No. Again, it was yelling me that turtles wasn't defined. So there we are. So we'll throw that in there now. Okay, so it's okay. And the reason why it's okay is because it's in functions and you have global variables and you have local variables and things like that. So this variable Ajax request doesn't exist anywhere outside of load enemies, outside of this function. So when we create it here and we do the request and we get it to load and all that fun stuff, and then when we run load enemies, this is called a local variable. It's only inside of load enemies, inside of this function. So if I were to take this outside, and throw it outside the function, it would freak out and give me some sort of error. But because it's inside of load enemies, it's not going to conflict. The fact that there's a variable called Ajax REQ here and Ajax REQ there, it's not going to conflict because this variable only exists inside a function and it doesn't care if it conflicts with anything outside of it. So that's cool that that works. Because before when I did this, actually, I was throwing a 2 in there and I'd have to go in there and put 2s everywhere, but it's good to know that works. And we don't have to worry about the global variables and stuff. And that's what this keyword does, actually. Here, let me see. I'm pretty sure that keyword makes it a local variable. Let's see. Actually, I'm just trying this out real quick. It's been a while since I played with local variables and such. Nope, it still worked. That's okay. All right, well, good. So we don't have to worry about changing all of that. Okay. So now we just need to do the third one. So button on click equals, I'm going to call it load moves. That's what I'm going to load. So load moves. Then we come in here. And again, I shouldn't, but I'm going to. I'm just going to copy and paste this. I again would recommend you write it out just so it kind of forces you to understand what's going on. Also, it'll make it so you'll make mistakes and you'll make mistakes and then you'll have to fix them and all that kind of stuff. All right, so we're setting up a new one. So really everything here is going to be exactly the same except for I'm going to come back to my week 2 and I'm going to grab the thing that loads the moves. I'm going to copy that and bring it over. So right here where it starts, and all the way down to where it ends. Brackets does a horrible job with that. This is where we had the double for loops. All right, so that bracket lines up with that one. That one's the if statement. This one is the for loop. That's right outside the for loop. That's for the if statement here. and that is for the function there, and this is for the function load moves. Okay. If you don't remember what this does, you can go back and watch week 2, or we'll go watch the other video, right? And that'll explain exactly what's going on here. I'm not going through that again just because, again, this video is going to be long enough. All right, so I just uploaded the HTML file and the JavaScript, so I'm going to upload those and overwrite. Okay, going to refresh here. Oh, it's going to yell at me again. Load enemy should work, but that won't work as well because what did I do, guys? The exact same thing I've done 3 times in a row now. Got to come over here and set up turtles. Yep, turtles is not defined. Right here. Again, that's taking the string that's returned with the open, right? It opens, it gets, it goes out there, grabs that file, it returns it as a string, just a big long just string of all the characters. So we take JSON.parse and we parse it into JSON, the response that we received when we went out and got that JSON file. Save that. Now we should be happy. Okay, so we'll refresh, that loads, we load the enemies, and then we load the moves. Great. Now, as you can see, right, pay attention, when I refresh the page and I click load enemies, the page is not refreshing. It's just going out there, communicating with the server, grabbing the JSON data, and then coming back and showing it. Same thing here, the page does not refresh. So that's the power of Ajax, is you don't have to do all these refreshes on the page. You can load things dynamically by just communicating with the server, grabbing what you need, and then loading that on the page instead of reloading everything. This obviously is good, as it's going to cut down on bandwidth. If you have people on your page, instead of loading all the images and all the text, you're just reloading that one little section on the page, which, you know, is pretty dang cool. All right, so you'll need to do this twice. You'll have to have a page, basically 2 pages that do this, that pull out there, grab stuff, just loads when the page loads, and then you'll have 2 other sections that load when you click on these buttons. And I don't care what part of your JSON stuff you load. It can be just that if you want, or it can be, you know, all of the different arrays and stuff. It doesn't matter to me what you load, what parts of your objects that you load. Okay. All right. So that's loading it when the page first loads. That's loading it when you click on a button. Now you got to create a completely different file. And we're going to load an external JSON file using JSON-P, which stands for JSON padding. And you're going to be loading this JSON file. If I go to it, you'll see that it looks a little weird. It doesn't look like a typical JSON file. It has data handler here, and we're going to talk about what that means when we get there. But let's get this created. So I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to copy this, create a new file, paste it, and I'm going to call it external.html because this is what's going to be pulling the external JSON file. Oh, don't want to save there. I want to save in my, here we go, call it external. I'll say load external JSON using Ajax. Let's see, I'm going to get rid of all these except for just one. Okay, and we will give this an ID of X just for external. Okay, and we're not going to do any external script files. We're just going to write it all in here. Okay, and then I'm going to show you both ways. You can load it when the page loads, or you can load it with a button click. And to be honest, I don't really care which one you do. All I care is that you load from an external JSON file. So load external JSON data is what the button will say here. And we will call load external. Okay, and then instead of an unordered list, we're just going to have this be a p tag, because it's just going to be like a paragraph of information that we're going to be loading. Nothing too crazy. Okay, so we'll do it to where it loads first, just when the page loads, and then I'll show you how to do it with a button, and you can kind of choose whatever one you want to do. So let's do it. So we're going to come here. We have the button. Underneath the button, we're going to create a script tag. Okay, now we need to kind of take a look at this. I'm going to open it. How do I have it? Well, we'll just look at it. So what you have to do is whoever controls this external JSON file, they have to wrap it into, which basically is like a function. Inside this JSON file, we basically created a function called data handler. This can be called really whatever you want. I called it data handler, so you'll have to use that because you'll be using my file. And we put the whole JSON object inside of a function. And I don't know how much you've done with JavaScript, but you are able to pass parameters, is what they're called. Is you can call inside of a function, you can call another function and pass information from function to function. So I could call a function, it runs some code, and then that function calls another function and has some data, and it throws that data over to the other function. It grabs it and does things with it. So really what's going to happen here is we're going to have a function that then takes this information and passes it so we can use it. Okay, and if you're going what the crap, you'll see it when we get there. Okay, so I'm going to head over here and I'm going to create a script tag, and I'm going to create a variable called output, just kind of like we've done before, just an empty string. Okay, and then I'm going to set up the little paragraph that I'm going to say here. So all right, so I'm going to say, well, we don't know how we're pulling it yet, but I'm going to say something like, how are you today? Do you like to? Okay, and so forth. We'll kind of finish that up in a minute. But we need to take a look at this. Okay, so this object has a key of greeting and a value of hello, then a key of verb and a value of eat, and a key of farewell and a value of bye. So you basically need to think of a paragraph that uses these three words. Okay, it doesn't have to be anything too crazy. I don't care what you say. I'm just grading it to see if you can get it to work. So what happens is when this data handler function gets called, the whole JSON object gets passed, and the function that you're calling needs to grab that and do something with it. So what we need to do here is we have to set up a function. Probably should have done this first. Oh well. And we're going to call it data handler. And we're going to receive all that JSON data inside of a parameter called talk. Sorry I did this in a bad order, guys. All right, so we have this function called data handler. And really, I mean, this could be, I don't know if we should call it data handler, because that might, well, we'll just keep it like that for now, and we'll see if it breaks it. So when this function, so when the JSON file gets ran, it's going to run the function called data handler. It's going to have this whole JSON object here stored in it, and then it's going to pass it to this function. Okay, and this function is going to receive it and store that whole store all that JSON data inside of talk. So now I can go talk.greeting, talk.verb, talk.farewell, and it'll give me these values. Okay. So now I can start using that. I can be like talk dot greeting. So it's going to say hello exclamation point space, how are you doing today? Do you like to, and then I'll say talk.verb. Shrink this down a little bit so we can see it. So talk.verb space sushi, which I definitely do not. And I'll be like, I don't. It's nasty. Anyway, hope you have an awesome day. Space. Talk.farewell. That's it. So talk.greeting, right? So we have the whole JSON object in talk. So talk.greeting is going to give us hello exclamation point. So hello exclamation point. How are you doing today? Space. Do you like to space talk.verb eat? So do you like to eat sushi? I don't. It's nasty. Anyway, hope you have an awesome day. Space talk.farewell gives us bye. All right, and then like we've done before, document.getElement by ID. The ID that we're messing with is right up here, X. So X, and we're going to change the inner HTML to equal output. Okay, so we've set up the code that's going to receive the JSON data. Okay, and we've also set up the code that stores the output, our message, and then puts it on the page. But again, functions don't do anything until you call them. So the way this works that I think is kind of weird is when this JSON data file loads, that's when the function gets called. So when you load this data, the JSON file, then data handler gets called, it passes the object to talk, and then it does all that. So I could not have the JSON data loaded here. And I do have a cat in here and he's annoying. So anyways, I'm going to load the JSON. Okay, remember the JSON is right here. This is the JSON file. So I can just grab that link, throw it in my code here. So the reason why this wouldn't work is when this loads, HTML and JavaScript load line by line. So it'd load all this stuff, it'd come down here, it would load the JSON file, it would see a function, it would try to run it. Well, the function doesn't exist. So, okay, yeah, actually this does have to be data handler. This can't be anything else because it's calling the function data handler and passing the JSON object to talk. Okay, so anyways, so it would load this and then it would try to run the function called data handler. Well, data handler hasn't been loaded yet because it loads line by line. So it'd get to line 10, it would try to run data handler. Well, data handler doesn't exist yet because it hasn't been loaded into the memory, so it'll throw an error and it won't work. So what we need to do is load the JSON down here. Okay, so it loads the function data handler, goes down. Okay, then it loads the JSON file, runs the data handler function, passes the JSON object to talk. Talk now holds the whole object, so now we can start, say, talk.greeting, talk.verb, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, usually the big thing here is just whenever you try to load external scripts or not external scripts, but external objects and things like that from other websites, from other hosts, usually the browser won't let you do this. But you are able to load external scripts. That's why we can do jQuery, which we're going to do in a minute. And you can do all kinds of different things. So this is basically creating a JSON file that will be able to be used cross-host. Okay. So let's save this. Okay, and I'm going to load this inside. Oh, let's get that loaded again. So we're going to public HTML. davekid.tk, JSON Ajax. All right, so now we're going to throw external in there. We hope this works. So now I'm loading this on davekid.tk, but it's going to be loading the JSON file from those onekids.com. So hopefully this will allow us to do cross-host, cross-domains, so forth. All right. So we're going to load external. Okay, and it worked. And I don't know if you could see on the video, but there was a slight delay. Loaded the page, and then maybe half a second later, it loaded this. Because it loaded the page, it did all the stuff. It had to go out there to those onekids.com, grab the JSON file, and then load it. Okay. Now, if we want this to be loaded by a button, we're going to have to use jQuery. Okay, so I'm going to Google jQuery, Google, come over here to hosted libraries. This is usually how I load jQuery here. jQuery allows us to do something kind of cool that helps make this work. So I'm going to grab the jQuery library, load it up here. Just throw it up there in the head tag. Okay, and instead of loading the script underneath, we're going to load it with a jQuery command. Okay, so outside of the data handler function, we'll just hit enter a couple times. And the jQuery to do this is we have to do a selector, and we're going to say button. So when a element with the button tag is clicked, we're going to run a function. Okay, and that function is going to be get script. And the script we're going to get is the JSON script. So the cool thing about this is jQuery. I don't know if you can do this with regular, well, I think you can with JavaScript. It's just a lot harder. But it has this built-in command jQuery does that just says, all right, when I have this button here, and I don't even need that on load. Get rid of that. So whenever, but the problem here is like with any, this is when any button's clicked. So if I had 3 or 4 buttons on the page, every button would run this. So I may want to do something like give it an ID of load external. So I could say something like this. So load external. So when the element with the ID of load external, load X, okay, right here, load X is clicked, it runs the function with this command called get script, and then it's going to grab the JSON script. So it's going to go out there, grab the JSON script, then from there it will run the function and run all of this. All right, so let's see if that works. To be honest, I'd try to get both to work. You might as well get the experience of getting both working. Okay, so now we come over here. Okay, because we do not load the script until we click the button, the JSON script was not loaded, so therefore nothing showed up. So now when I click on this, it loads. All right, so you can pick whatever one you want to do here. Either one's fine. So anyways, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm here to help. Come to my tutoring hours, and we'll talk to you later.